Hi folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness. I'm joined today by a returning special guest, Kieran Woodhouse. How you doing,
Right.
sir?
Very good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah.
Good man.
Before we jump in, I was wondering if you could just direct people to what you're up to at the moment. I mean, obviously we talked in our last recording because you used to do the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. Is it? Are you still doing that
Yeah,
now? You,
yeah,
you are?
great. Yeah, you remembered the
I
name.
remembered it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got through, can't remember, it's like 35, 40 shows of that.
Right. Okay.
And then obviously the little lad was starting to get older, stay up later,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just got more and more difficult to fit people in. And when I'm interviewing people in America and the time zones are different, it just got
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
difficult. So I've never cancelled it. It's just
All
on
right. Okay.
on
That's
a,
brilliant.
a rather long hiatus.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good to hear. I'm glad you're still doing it. Yeah, definitely. And you have a couple of books.
Yeah, sure. So I've got an introduction to paranormal investigation
That's right.
and experiences of a paranormal investigator are the two books. I've
Okay.
got a third one in the works at the minute,
Right. Okay.
being written about my local area and experiences and ghosts around that area.
I also want to remind people about your previous documentary, which is a really excellent piece of work. That is a haunting in Essex, if I remember rightly.
A Haunting Essex, yeah, you can find
Yeah.
that on
Yeah.
YouTube if you
That's
search
a
for that, or
really
if
good
you search
watch.
for Soul Paradigm, the channel. It's on there. Yeah, it's in fact, I don't know if I've spoken to you about that recently, but about 6 months ago now, that house burnt to the ground.
Wow. No, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, the fact while the family were inside, they
Oh,
none of
everybody
them were
okay?
harmed. Yeah, they're
Hopefully,
all okay.
that's good to hear.
But
That's good to hear.
supposedly they couldn't trace it back to anything except for it started in their wardrobe or something,
Really?
which
All right. Okay.
where there's no electrical equipment or anything.
Right.
Um, so yeah, they've been given another house now, but it's interesting. I'm gonna give them time to settle in before I ask them, has it followed?
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Yeah, I was
I
just
can't
about
do
to
it
ask
now
that.
because it's a bit
Yeah.
insensitive,
Yeah.
but
Obviously, of course. Yeah.
give
Yeah.
give it a bit of time,
Yeah.
and it'll be interesting to know what's happening now.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was always interested in following up on that one, hoping you would do something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it's worth mentioning as well the Free Thinking Society. I do believe you've changed venues now, haven't you?
Right, yeah, it's not been an easy couple of months really. So
Right. Okay.
the Free Thinking Society is a group that did meet in the Stourbridge area, in the West Midlands. We meet second Monday of every month. We have different talkers like yourself, Carl, from a range of subjects, from the paranormal to conspiracies, right the way up to just being healthy and
Yeah.
healthy nutrition. Unfortunately, we kind of got kicked out of our last venue.
Mm,
Venue was brought out, and the new owners didn't want us.
right.
And we do have another venue. It's probably not ideal for the long term, but they've been
Right.
good enough to take us in for now. And I think the first talk, I'm waiting for confirmation, but the first talk will be Mark Devlin
Oh, right. Okay. That's great. Yeah.
next month. I think it's going to be the
Excellent researcher. Yeah. Yeah.
10th of February, and that will be at Katie Fitzgerald's, which is still in Stourbridge, a little bit out of the town.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're kind of yeah, it'll do us for now, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's probably a more permanent move on the horizon at some
Yeah.
point.
Okay. That's good to hear. Yeah. Yeah. You're still doing it. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay then. So, is there anything else you want to mention? I would love to get into
No, get
the
into it.
documentary you're currently working on. One of the things I've been going through recently on YouTube is all this, like the amount of paranormal channels there are now, and what their motives are behind it. Is it just money? Is it just notoriety? And clearly, there's loads that have
Well,
become famous, but they're complete charlatans. They really are.
we're literally just editing into the final stages of editing my latest documentary,
All right. Okay.
which is actually going out and interviewing these teams on location
All right.
and asking why do you do this?
Right.
And so again, the actual paranormal almost takes a back seat, and
Yeah.
I'm more interested in these people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
finding
Yeah.
out why do they
Are
spend.
you happy to talk about that a little bit, or is it something
Yeah,
that
it's
you're
free
trying to keep
promotion,
under
isn't it?
wraps? Yeah.
No, no, it's
Okay.
free promotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's similar to what you're just saying there. Like these people that are out there and why
Mm,
are they doing it? What
yeah.
are they getting out of it?
I don't know if you want to sort of hold off on that for a little bit while we talk about what initially is going to bring us into this subject, or do you think it'd be probably better to talk about that first?
I'm not fussed, Carl. I mean, I'll let you lead. Make it.
Okay. So the key thing really that kind of led this. We're going to talk about the nature of paranormal investigation, and specifically one of the areas that really interests me is it's kind of a part of a larger phenomenon that's going on the internet at the moment about how people so readily and it sounds quite severe saying it, but quite blindly believe everything that they see. And this isn't just, I mean, it's been a recent thing with the UFO UAP phenomenon as well, the whole drones in New Jersey thing and all that malarkey, and there's a lot of contentious opinion on that. And I think that, I've got some thoughts about a lot of it is just money motivated and notoriety and that kind of thing. But there's clearly a lot of charlatans out there. There's clear, and one of the sad things about it now is that, as I was talking to somebody about it the other day, literally these things are like today. They are like a mini film studio in your hand,
Yeah,
and you can do anything with them. There's apps that you can do all kinds of CGI type stuff, with editing and all that kind of thing, and
yeah,
and it looks as good as something that perhaps would have only have been in the domain of a high end film studio, say 30 years ago.
yeah,
Whereas if somebody's filming something with a tape, the old fashioned tape video cameras,
yeah,
back in the day, it would be so much harder to fake that. Not impossible, but it would be a lot harder.
yeah,
People were more inclined to believe that. Well, you see a lot of this stuff now. It's almost like there's a level of dissociation going on there, where people look kind of
yeah,
either they're blindly believing everything. I mean, I'm sorry not to monopolize this, but one of the things that I saw recently. I mean, you will really laugh at this one. It was I'm not going to mention the channels, but there was a couple, and it was about UFOs,
yeah,
and they'd put up this footage that somebody had filmed over Las Vegas, and they said that this was an alien spacecraft or it was some high-end piece of American technology. The craft was the USS Discovery from Star Trek, and yet the person that was hosting the video was talking about it as though this was real, and people were filling the comments up saying it's from Star Trek, it's from Star Trek. No, no,
yeah.
no, 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 no. It was clearly just a CGI rendered version of it, but the person that was, I mean, well, what's going on there, And I kind of feel that a very similar kind of thing is happening with the sort of the ghost phenomenon, as it were, as well. But that's
Yeah,
something that we can get into further
yeah,
along the line.
yeah.
But yeah.
I,
So sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think with you made a really good point. So, what I tend to end the recent kind of round of group talks that I've been given, I've ended it on evidence and where do we go with it now? Because
Yeah,
essentially, can we ever believe anything we ever see again?
yeah,
And
yeah.
the problem is, as you say, with your phone, you've got AI now and
Hmm.
CGI and stuff like that. And as much as the equipment that is used to capture this evidence is getting better and better, so is the equipment that can be used to manipulate it and fake it and stuff. So, and then that kind of leads me on to another discussion point of, but what does it matter? So if you believe in the paranormal, if you, and that isn't just ghosts, that I
Hmm.
would class UFOs within that realm. If you believe in the paranormal, why do you need to convince someone else?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you capture the best piece of evidence ever, you can't do anything with it because you're
No.
either going to show it someone who already believes.
Hmm.
What's the point in showing them? Or you're going to show it someone who thinks it's fake and they'll call you a shill.
Yeah.
So again, what's the point?
Hmm.
So it's actually in my mind, and this is probably quite pessimistic of me as I've kind of got more and more into this, but what's the point in collecting the evidence? So for me, it's just become more and more about personal experiences.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
if you can leave an investigation, like if you go to bed and if you know
Hmm.
I've experienced X, Y, and Z tonight, I didn't
Mm.
capture it on camera, but I experienced it,
Yeah. Yeah.
then to me that's important and that's all
That's
that
enough, actually. I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a degree of if you know somebody and they've experienced something and you trust that person and they
Trust,
tell
yeah,
you, there's
yeah.
that obviously, but outside of that thing of why, I suppose really there's that the need to understand these things, which is probably why we document and record,
Mhm. Yep,
to
yep.
investigate further.
There's no harm in documenting and
But of
recording
course,
for a
sharing it with
case
other
study.
people,
Yeah. It's when it comes to sharing it with
yeah.
other people,
And why do they? That's the thing, isn't it? It's like, what are they trying to prove, these people, that, and as we so often find, there's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of people who are just in it to make money or to get famous, or
Yep.
and yeah, I mean, these some of these channels have got, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of subscribers, and views and that, and it's just crazy because I think it plays into that thing as well of people who not just beyond, not just wanting to believe, but quite often you will find that people have an emotional attachment to understanding what's going on. So it may be that they've lost somebody
Yes.
and they want some confirmation that that person is okay and they're doing all right and that kind of thing. So they desperately need some sort of validation of this, of the, so the thing that's attached to it is this idea of life after death, or whatever, however you would describe it. And so I feel that there's a lot of people out there that take advantage of that, and these
Yep.
are really unscrupulous people, especially when they start charging people for things. And
Which has gone back for, you can go back centuries.
oh,
Well,
of
not,
course,
not you
yeah, yeah,
probably can go back centuries, but
yeah,
go back to kind of the Victorian times where they would fake the seances and stuff.
yeah,
People would go really believing they were talking to
yeah,
their dead son or someone that had just
mm,
died in a war or something, and really it was all fake. I
yeah,
mean, I genuinely believe when you talk about like of course, there are so many YouTube stars and stuff, but when you talk about the big hitters, the most haunted, the ghost hunters, the
hmm,
ghost adventures,
yeah,
the people like that, I think they genuinely start out with the best of intents.
right,
They 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 are genuinely interested in wanting to capture the paranormal. The problem is that the more popular they get, it almost becomes a noose around their neck, and then
yeah,
they have a TV producer saying, "Well, it's boring." Because let's be honest, ghost hunting is boring. You're sat in a dark room trying not to fall asleep. So
yeah, yeah,
what they're saying is you've got to make something happen because otherwise people are going to switch off. And if people switch off, then we don't get a second series. And if we don't get a second series, we don't make our money.
yeah,
So eventually, they all almost have to turn to exaggerating the truth, shall we say,
yeah,
to say the least. But the second they do that, the second they lose all
mhm,
credibility, and it just becomes entertainment then,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
as it becomes as real as wrestling,
Mm,
really.
mhm. Did you any takes on that? How when things like Most Haunted that used to air on British broadcast television, and there would always be a disclaimer on the beginning that said, "This is for entertainment purposes."
Entertainment purposes, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that is on the front of it. There's a different TV, programs like Wife Swap and Jerry Springer and stuff like that. It always has the same,
yeah,
even
yeah,
like
yeah.
Undercover Boss USA has this is
Mhm.
for entertainment purposes only. So um, I think that's a dead giveaway,
Mm, mm,
to be honest. And I know you want to get into to Ghostwatch during this
mm,
discussion, but to me,
absolutely.
there's not in my own skeptical mind, it's not a far cry the difference between Ghostwatch and something
No,
like Most Haunted, really.
absolutely not. I mean, he's some of the things are uncanny. Like, I mean, I do actually. We will talk about that documentary that you're working on in a moment. But just while it's fresh in my memory,
Yeah.
I was thinking, and it could just be people could just be saying, "Oh, this is just a coincidence." But I did find it interesting that you have. We'll go into more detail with Ghostwatch, but one of the actors in it, I should say, is Sarah Green, who started out on children's television and Blue Peter and all that, and then went into more serious stuff. Then you have Yvette Fielding,
Right building, yeah.
Most
Blue
Haunted,
Peter.
started out Blue Peter children's television, then goes
Yeah.
into more, So there's some uncanny parallels there, really, if you look a bit
Yeah,
deeper.
I would
But
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So at the moment, you are working on a new documentary.
For those that have watched the first one that we spoke about briefly, it won't be as evidence heavy.
Okay.
Essentially, what we wanted to do is we wanted to take a different angle. So you look at these TV shows, these famous groups, and it's almost like it's always about the evidence. So as we've just spoke about, they manipulate the evidence in order to become famous. But
Mm,
there are hundreds and thousands of people that go out every weekend to these desolate, cold, dark, damp locations, and some beautiful locations as well,
mm,
to to try and find the evidence of ghosts. And I wanted to forget about the ghosts and really focus on them. Why do they go and spend some of these people that I've kind of spoken to whilst filming this will spend their Fridays and Saturdays with various groups,
yeah. Yeah.
um, 8 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
uh, investigating these locations. And why do they do it? And unfortunately, these people, myself included, get tagged with being nutters for believing in this kind of stuff. And and for what do you mean you believe in ghosts? That's crazy. And I wanted to almost prove that they're not, and that they're just normal people.
Mm.
Why do they do it? What is their beliefs?
Mm.
Have they had any experiences, of course? And so what we decided to do was go and on location with three different groups in various locations, and and it, interview them and film them while they're doing their thing, while they're investigating,
Right.
talk to them about what they're doing, have they had any experiences, try and capture some evidence, of course. And I can tell you about one thing that we caught.
Okay.
But the stars of the show are the people themselves. And
Right.
similar to the previous documentary, we did have a lot of evidence, but it was all about the family. How are
Family.
they coping with this? How are they getting through this? And it's the same with this. Who are these people? Why do they do it? What exactly are they doing? So that's what it is. The aim is to get it out for February, March time. So we're in
Okay.
like kind of the late editing stage of it now. We've got everything, and we're just kind of, where does this go? Where do we want this? Where do we want that?
Okay.
Um, it started out as we were going to do three mini episodes. The more it's gone on, I think it's just going to be a long documentary featuring the three groups.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of all I can say now, because that's really all it is.
Okay.
But
Sounds
yeah,
fascinating. Sounds really interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it will be. But again, I'll put my disclaimer at the start, which is if you're watching this for jump scares, then turn it off because you're going to be bored. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where we were talking about experiential factors with all of this. Um, what it, like you say, what is your motivation for it? And if it's just, I think we're all kind of in a position where we'd like some sort of confirmation of something. I mean, clear for me, I already know that there's a phenomenon at work. I've experienced it enough in my life many times, different ways. So that it's just a given for me. It's more about what's actually going on as opposed to what it is, as opposed to the fact that it's happening. I should say, understanding it. Is it just the spirits of the dead? Is it? And obviously, we've talked in the previous video we recorded together about the Twin Peaks about energy and consciousness and frequencies and all that kind of thing. What kind of manifestation in our through our own sort of energy and all that
Absolutely.
kind of thing. There's all manner of ways in which and but a lot of people tend to be stuck with this idea of it being ghosts of dead people,
Oh, don't,
spirits of
Carl.
dead
It's
people.
yeah. The more I've delved into the paranormal, the more I've begun to realize that. I mean, I'm not saying that that isn't possible, and it's not possible that there's various things, at play. It doesn't have
Mm,
to necessarily be one set thing.
mm,
But you're right. The more I've looked into it, the more I believe people actually create their own haunting.
mm.
They create their own experiences. It has to be.
I think my slight sort of tweaked take on it is because of I mean you've heard me talk in the past about different things and that, and I've talked about like the energy and consciousness thing and all that. And if you go down like sort of like the morphic resonance route and Rupert Sheldrake and all that kind of thing, and the monkeys that pick up things across the world from without ever encountering each other and that kind of thing, infinite consciousness basically,
Collective
collective
consciousness, I call
consciousness
it.
and
But
that,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So as receiver transmitters, human beings, that we're kind of constantly attached to that,
yeah,
and we are picking up stuff and sending stuff into that. And who knows that if a person that's cast off their mortal coil has returned to that non non-linear time sort of
yeah,
thing that's
yeah.
infinite, and we're it's sort of replaying itself backwards and forwards, coming in, coming out. We're pulling it in sometimes, making it, so in that respect you could kind of slightly argue that there is an afterlife and that there is, but it's just not the traditional sense of a ghost, a soul, a spirit, and
Yeah, a dead person
yeah,
that can't move on for whatever
yeah,
reason.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting you bring that up, because I was speaking to a friend the other day about this, and about those people go into a coma and then they wake up and they can speak fluid Mandarin.
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
they can wake up all of a sudden they can compose classical music despite never
Yeah.
playing an instrument in their life.
Yeah.
Um, is it possible that what's happened is they've essentially their brain has rewired and they've pulled from this collective
Hmm.
consciousness,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you've restarted your laptop and you've now got Linux running instead of
Yeah.
Windows or whatever,
Yeah.
Um, I can't understand any other way to explain how someone could wake up and speak fluently in a language
Hmm.
they've never heard, never been
Yeah.
around,
Yeah. Yeah.
never studied.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's definitely something external to our sort of flesh and bone
Yeah,
physical experience. Definitely. This is just a sort of a stop along the way, as if you want to sort of simplify it into those terms. I was having a discussion with a friend today, actually, before this recording. I was talking about the fact that we were going to be doing this recording and what we were going to be talking about and different areas like that, and kind of getting across that idea of how I tried to very badly just tried to articulate it, and how you were talking about it as well, which is probably more succinct than me. But this idea that it is just receiver transmitter kind of thing, and it's just sort of like a temporary sort of state of being. And
yep,
there's definitely some, and if you want to interpret that as being the afterlife, then but that's kind of just adding words to it, because it's very difficult for us to articulate these things that are so abstract
yeah,
sometimes. That is the nature of what this sort of extra level of reality is.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so abstract that as soon as you start slapping words and phrases and terms on things, you're kind of reducing it and
That's
diminishing
human
it.
nature. It's human nature,
Yeah,
though,
but
Carl.
that's how I want to understand. I need to
Exactly,
understand,
the
isn't it?
need to understand,
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
said about that person who's lost a loved one, and it's the need to
hmm,
find out if they're okay, and therefore
yeah,
they
yeah,
get tricked
yeah.
by charlatans.
Yeah, yeah. So if you send me the information for the documentary, if that's
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
and
sure.
I will after I've uploaded this, I will add that into the description as well.
Okay.
And I might even clip this little bit around the time that you release the video and put it
Okay.
up as a separate video as well, so that it just gives it an extra bit of
Okay.
um
Cool. Thank you.
yeah. Definitely looking forward to that. So, shall we then go back to 1992, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover further on to what we were
Um,
just talking about?
no, yeah, I was 3 years old. Go on.
Really? I forget sometimes that people are younger than me, and I always assume that everybody's seen something when it came to it, because I did actually see it when it aired live. So how did you watch? How did you come to know about it? Is it through what you do, the
Yeah,
investigation and that?
I don't think you can kind of get into the paranormal world without hearing about the Great
Hmm.
Ghostwatch.
Ghostwatch, yeah.
And it was about 10 years ago. I had a friend and he had it on VHS. And he still had a VHS player.
Right.
I don't think it was like the original VHS. He must have taped it or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, we watched it, and
Right.
still had it was the classic VHS with all the scatty lines kind of
Yeah.
running through and stuff. But yeah, I kind of watched it, and I knew at this point what it was, and I knew what it was all about, and I knew the story behind it. So I'd never really got that original experience, which I do
I
wish I
think,
had done. But
yeah, that's the key thing to the effectiveness as it was back then, is seeing it as it went out.
yeah,
Because obviously times were simpler then, and we didn't have the internet
mhm,
really to speak of. Certainly if you watch, I mean, there's plenty of it on YouTube. You can go and watch old television and that, and it's a lot tamer back in those
yeah,
days.
yeah,
So I think people were a bit more naive and a bit more innocent in the way there's certainly a lot more accepting of what the BBC would tell them is real, which is totally the opposite end of the
yeah,
paradigm now.
yeah.
you know. Um, but it aired. Interestingly, what I found out about it was originally a six-part drama series with the final episode. So they were investigating like East Drive and Enfield and
Yeah,
all that. It
yeah,
was like
yeah.
that, and it would have been done as a drama series. Then the final episode was taking it to the house live and doing the studio thing at the same time.
Okay.
The BBC didn't want to fund it. They didn't want to fund the full thing. They said, "What about just doing the last bit, the last episode?
Right.
We'll extend it, and when we have like the callers, people calling in, we can add in little bits of the previous episodes as the backstory.
Uh,
Like the child that died and blah blah,
yeah,
blah and the
yeah.
all the rest of it. Um, so that was how they managed to sort of insert the sort of the earlier episodes,
Yeah,
bits of the story from that. And yeah, and what's interesting as well, the behind the scenes, which kind of ties back into that War of the Worlds book that I wrote and the
yeah,
talk I did at your venue at Free Thinking Society, is that just like Orson Welles said with War of the Worlds, this was our little experiment. The writer and the director said the same thing about Ghostwatch. This was our little experiment to see what we could get away with, to see what people would believe, and also to see whether the BBC would commission it and
yeah.
allow it to be made and air it. Obviously, infamously now, it seriously backfired because there was, I mean, it's just an estimate, but it's around about 1 million people phoned up the BBC in the weeks afterwards.
That
Some,
many.
yeah, some were complimenting it, a lot of them were complaining. And there was obviously, I'm going to be careful how I word this because obviously it's YouTube, but so this chap he was an 18-year-old factory worker called Martin Denham, and he had learning difficulties, so he had like the mental age of a 13-year-old.
Right. Okay.
And they'd got old central heating into my mum and dad's house, exactly the same pipe, banging pipes on the
Yep.
walls.
Yeah, we get it here.
A
Yeah.
lot of people have it still in the UK. And it was the same with this young, tragically, this lad was convinced that the banging in his house was pipes, the ghost from Ghostwatch, and tragically, he ended his own life.
Really? And was that, see, I mean, now that happened with Jeremy Kyle and it was took off air. What
Yeah.
what what were the ramifications with
Well, there was an
what?
investigation, Broadcasting Standard Commissions. They concluded that the BBC had created a deliberate attempt to cultivate a sense of menace.
That's just their
And
normal news program, isn't it?
yeah, and well, yeah, yeah. Um, Obviously, it never aired again in the UK. To this day, it's never been re-aired in the UK. It was released
Wow.
on, like you say, it was released on video, it's released on DVD, it's released on Blu-ray, which I have a copy of that on Blu-ray. It was shown in various other parts of the world, I think Canada and a couple of other countries, but was never allowed to be re-aired. You would think that possibly today it would be all right, but it still never has been. It's not
That's
even on
interesting.
BBC iPlayer, It's
No, no. Well, to watch it again in order to bring me back up to speed for this chat, you had to send me a link. I couldn't find anything.
yeah, yeah,
It was,
yeah.
but yeah, it's very difficult to find a copy. I mean,
Mm,
if they aired it now, I mean, it's something I was thinking whilst watching it again. Actually, was if they were to pull that stunt now, what would they get away with it?
mm,
Because
mm.
Most Haunted did live shows,
They did, and they're very similar actually in the way they did the
the
Ghostwatch thing with
layout and
the
everything.
yeah, the way
Yeah,
it's set up with
they have the
the
skeptic there talking. They
yeah,
have the
yeah, yeah,
person
yeah,
over on the phone lines or
yeah,
in the audience talking to the audience, getting their
yeah,
reaction.
yeah,
It's very similar. It was just brought more into the modern day, wasn't it? Because I remember
yeah,
watching a Most Haunted live, and then going onto my computer, my desktop at the time, and logging into I think it was the Dudley Castle one, and logging
right,
into the you could watch webcams. So they set webcams up in like the
yeah,
zoo shop and all these other places. And I remember sitting there with my dad, kind of with the TV there, and we were watching. And we were like, oh, "Did you see
yeah,
that?" And
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
ran past the camera, and it's like, and thinking back, how easy would it be
Oh, yeah,
to fake that?
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
But it was great at the time.
yeah, yeah.
So I did a talk in Bristol once, a Truth Juice group in Bristol, which is actually incidentally where I met the guy who now helps me film my documentaries.
Right, okay,
And there was a lady there, and she pulled me up, and she said my partner did some sound with Most Haunted.
right,
He did a bit of working with them, and yeah, he said like one of them would just disappear. He
yeah,
would they just vanish, and
yeah,
then you'd hear
yeah.
knocking, and then they'd be back in with
Back
the group
again.
again,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
he's like it's obvious where they
yeah.
what was going on.
I'm going to give a little shout out here to a channel called, you probably know it actually, called Beardo Gets Scared
Yeah,
on YouTube. And he did one recently because Most Haunted were doing these theatre shows recently.
yes, yeah,
And he did one and he was talking about people sort of disappearing off and then people in the audience could hear tapping and that. I mean, of course, I'm not going to say these things directly. I'm going to say allegedly. We'll
of course,
add
yeah,
allegedly to all these, including what this person told me about Cole Beatty. It's alleged. This
yeah,
person it just could be bad blood,
yeah,
Who knows? So I will put that disclaimer there. But yeah, I mean, some people don't shy away from saying these things as
But
they are.
this is the thing. So when, as a person like yourself who was around when Ghostwatch originally aired,
Hmm.
again, it's different, isn't it? Because nowadays, imagine if that was on now, people would be on Facebook talking about it live. That people would be on forums discussing it and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
in those days, that couldn't happen. So
yeah,
I imagine until the next day and you went to work and spoke to your
yeah,
mate about what you'd just seen the
yeah.
night before, you couldn't really talk to anyone about
No.
it. But what was the reaction? You know, were people saying, "Well, it was obviously fake"?
Um, I think when I watched it, I'm not afraid to admit that I left the light on for a couple of days
Yeah,
at night.
yeah,
I think the pipes thing was very effective the way it looked because it didn't look like an apparent horror type thing. It was just sort of lurking there in the shadow in the background for the
yeah,
most part.
yeah.
That was very effective because it's suggested rather than blatant.
Yes,
So that I thought, and clearly all the most haunteds and the ghost hunters and ghost adventures, all that they've kind of ran with that, and
yeah,
it almost seems like they modelled it on that.
yeah,
Could
absolutely.
just be a coincidence, but it seems that way. I remember clearly it was apparent to me that it was just a drama towards the end with the stuff in the studio, and I remember a lot of people saying, yeah, it clearly wasn't real. But I do remember a lot of people saying how good it was, how effective it was, and there were a few moments here and there where they not believed that it was real, but were a bit sort of spooked by it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So it's probably the
Yeah.
best way of describing it. It
Okay.
certainly it got people gripped. And
Yeah,
I think if you are easily influenced. Certainly children. I mean,
yeah,
one
of
of the
course. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, let me just mention that actually, because like I say, there was a study afterwards. These chaps called Simons and Silvera, and they published a report in the British Medical Journal in February 1994 describing two cases of ghost watch induced post trauma stress disorder in children, both 10-year-old boys. They stated that these were the first reported cases of PTSD caused by a television program.
Wow.
Responses to the article described a further four cases in children aged between 11 and 14, as well as one in an 8-year-old that stemmed from watching the pre-watershed hospital soap Casualty. So that was another part of the study that they were doing. The respondents also noted the potential for similar reactions in elderly people, and I can kind of think that that could be the case with some elderly people
Yeah,
because, again, it goes back to that whole thing of the Auntie Beeb, comfort television, safe with the BBC. They've never had any reason to doubt it,
doubt
and
them. Yeah,
and then
yeah,
all of a sudden the BBC's lying to them and tricking them into thinking that this is a real live ghost investigation of a house,
yeah.
and and
The,
it
the
wasn't.
the most recent thing I can think that tried to do similar, and they must have been inspired about it, thinking about it, was Inside Number Nine.
Yeah, I haven't watched it, but I know I've heard about it.
They did the live fig.
Right,
So again, we watched that live, and
right.
I guess you could say that was the modern day Ghostwatch for my generation.
Mm,
And I remember watching it, thinking it was genuinely live,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it wasn't until stuff started to happen, and then I think the natural skeptic in me, I kind of turned to the missus and was like, "This is obviously fake. This is obviously it's just not real." Um, but I know a lot of people that did actually fall for it.
Right, right,
And something else that they did inside Number Nine was they did a program called Free by Free or something. So what they did is they aired the Inside Number Nine program, but they didn't have the Inside Number Nine titles at the start. It was
right.
essentially a quiz show.
Ah, right, okay.
And so it started just as a quiz show. And obviously they weren't in it, it was just other actors. And so people were watching it apparently saying, well, where's Inside Number Nine?
Ah, right,
This is a
okay.
quiz show called Three by Three. And of course, Three by
Right.
Three is nine. And that was their
Ah, right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but at the end of the quiz show, something happens and someone gets killed or something, and then people are like, "Whoa, what the hell?"
Right,
And
right,
it wasn't until like right at the end you realise, oh, that was Inside Number Nine,
right,
and
right.
that tricked a lot of people.
It's clever, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
It's very clever, and I
Mm,
think going back to what we spoke about with how easy it is now to fake things.
mm,
I think a lot of people have become very desensitized to a lot of this stuff. You
yeah,
mentioned that, I think, off camera, the desensitization.
yeah.
I think if they were to try and pull something off like that now, they would have to go to really severe extremes because I think
Mm,
so many people would just be going, "Well, this is rubbish."
mm,
I don't think they could pull it off as easy now.
mm. I get the sentiment, but I think, I mean, without being too controversial, and again talking about this on YouTube, but there's a certain subject that certainly Mark Conlon's researched it very,
Yeah,
very thoroughly. Technology that exists that can make things appear that aren't there. And there's that obviously that thing that's a beam that's coloured blue. That
yeah,
research that's been
yeah,
done.
yeah.
Make of that what you will. Some people dispute it, but I think the fundamental principle underneath it is real. I think the technology is there nowadays.
But yeah, of course
Um,
it is. But think about the extremities there. You've gone from what was the guy that did Ghostwatch?
Michael Parkinson.
Michael Park. I always get him and Michael Aspel mixed up. Remember
Yeah.
Strange but True? For
Yes,
years,
Michael Aspel. Yeah, yeah.
I thought that was Michael Parkinson. I
Right.
know.
Okay.
But from him in a studio and this kind of little BBC documentary, right the way up to these beams that are blue projecting things
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
That is a huge difference.
Totally, totally. And that
And
kind
so
of. Sorry,
they've
go on.
had to go to those extremes, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
yeah,
in
exactly.
order to trick people now.
Yeah, which is good in some respect. Well, it's not good in terms of what the implications of that, but it's good in the respect that um, isn't it strange how people will no longer believe what's on broadcast media, yet they'll watch a video on YouTube and far more readily believe that.
Yeah,
And I think that's kind of the double-edged sword of our trust that we've placed so much in the internet for years up to recently where it's starting to change now. But that's the sad sort of drawback of doing that is that old saying, isn't it? If you open your mind up, but not so much that your brain falls
brain
out.
falls out.
And
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what's happened a little bit now with the internet. So you've got people that just believe anything, and then you've got people that where I'm starting to creep towards is that I'm so skeptical of based on the possibility that it can be faked, and that's just swinging the other way, isn't it?
yeah.
Really.
You're
Um,
almost as bad as believing everything.
mm,
You're not believing anything.
yeah, but then what you were saying about the media, it's it. It came from that time, the War of the Worlds thing, 1938. Radio was the god, basically, in terms of broadcasting and media and all that kind of thing. I know newspapers were as well, but it was the perfect time to do something like that with the radio. And I would argue that once we'd sort of outgrown our naivety of television, the 1990s, where it started to become a bit more edgy and a
Yeah,
bit more, 80s maybe, but certainly the 90s. So you could finally get away with something like Ghostwatch. And you've got that fine line then between. I mean, you watched it last. It clearly is fake. It clearly is.
yeah. This is it.
But there's
But in the
so many
90s,
touchstones within it
yeah,
to the kind of things that came afterwards.
yes,
Horror
yeah.
directors. We talked about this off camera. The amount of horror directors and writers that were in, Paranormal Activity, Rec. Um,
Blair
I
Witch
think they've
Project.
mentioned about the Blair Witch Project recently as well. They were gently or massively inspired by Ghostwatch. There's been another film which I know you haven't got around to watching it yet, but I'll just mention it for our viewers. Late Night with the Devil, which is owes a big debt to Ghostwatch. It's a late night TV chat show, and you watch in the film as it's live airing. It's laid out like that. It's even got the aesthetic, the type of film that they've used, and the sort of the imagery and that the way
Yeah,
it would have been top cameras it was shot with at the time and that. But it kind of cuts back to documentary stuff behind the cameras when the crew are milling around and talking to each other, and then it goes back to the broadcast bit, and it's so effective. And it's really similar kind of thing. It clearly was inspired by Ghostwatch
right.
to some degree. But
Yeah,
I thought it was fascinating because it kind of ties back in with the discussion we had about Twin Peaks, actually. We was talking about the owls and all that because
yeah.
the presenter of this late night talk show, his ratings are going down and he makes some connections in the industry and all that. And he goes off to Bohemian Grove,
Right.
puts
Okay.
a deal there. They do this ritual thing and all that, and he has to make a sacrifice for his success. It turns out that his wife gets diagnosed with terminal cancer. She dies, but then the ratings start kicking off for the show then.
Okay.
One of the bizarre things in it is that there's kind of an indication that there was something that was floating around in the woods, a bit like the Twin Peaks thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
these
Something in
entities
the
coming
air.
in from other
Yeah.
dimensions and all that and anything. So they have these various guests on, And then they have this psychic chap who comes on, and then they have this doctor that comes on, which is a very much like
Yeah.
the doctor in Ghostwatch,
Yeah.
and she brings on this girl that's been rescued from a satanic cult,
Right.
and she's got a demonic entity that periodically is sort of talking through her and all that kind of thing. He's desperate to get the ratings for the show. He wants this show to be here. He says, right, let's get this demon on air. There's this really freaky line in it where obviously this young girl get this entity comes through and all that. And she says, hello again. She says, we met beneath the tall trees. So
Ah,
clearly, it was there watching over him,
at
at
Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you've got the owl thing with Bohemian Grove, and the
Yeah.
talk show is called Night Owls, and the logo for it has got like, well, I almost thought they looked like the Twin Towers actually, but it's like a
Yeah.
skyscraper type thing with an owl bird type thing sitting on top of it. And then at the end of it, I won't spoil it for you, but there's this weird sort of scenario, and you see like a depiction of the owl to Bohemian Grove and all that as well.
Okay.
And it's just crazy.
That sounds good.
It's
Sounds like the
crazy.
type of
Yeah.
film I'd watch.
Yeah, but I haven't said too much about it to spoil it for you there.
No, 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 no,
As it
no.
goes on, you'll see what happens. But yeah, it's definitely with the whole studio thing and all that with Ghostwatch. It's
Yeah. I think Ghostwatch was massively inspired by the Enfield haunting itself.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Two girls talking in a deep,
yeah,
manly voice.
yeah.
The 90s, it couldn't have been done at a better time, you
Mm,
know. A decade later, and we had the internet, and it probably would have been easier to spot the fakes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and there would have been more people just skeptical towards it, and you would have had online communities talking about it while it was happening, pointing out why it's not real and all
Mm,
that stuff. So, just like War of the Worlds,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it had to happen then for it to be
yeah.
effective.
But that's a good lead into something that came to my attention recently. It's certainly something I wrote about in my book. I already sort of kind of posed that idea of it being an experiment in fear. The Ghostwatch was actually,
Yeah,
a social
yeah,
psychology study through the BBC. Certainly, there's a lot of evidence showing that War of the Worlds was, and like I cited that study after the fact, and I know that there were some people. One of my contacts, specifically one who's former BBC employee, told me about social psychologists. I don't know if they were actually part of the staff at the BBC and they happened to be social psychologists, although they were brought in. And but they were certainly studying the after effect of Ghostwatch, and he'd heard a rumor that there possibly may have been some nudging on the part of the BBC to create a program of that type beforehand.
right.
And it just happened to be, whether you believe in coincidences or not, that Ghostwatch happened to fit the bill for that. It is interesting that they wouldn't commission this six-part drama, but they'd commission the last bit, the live bit,
The
that was
bit, yeah,
almost like it was real.
yes,
And if you watch the behind-the-scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, the writer, I think, let me just check his name. I think it was Stephen Volk, but yeah, and the director Leslie Manning, they said that just like Orson Welles did, this was our little experiment to see what we could get away with, to see what kind of thing the BBC would actually do if they were going to air something like this for real. Although obviously it wasn't,
yeah.
and you've got a lot of dynamics there, using real presenters, not actors. Well, I mean that like Sarah Green and Mike Reed, and that they had acting training before they got into their careers. But using real presenters, Michael Parkinson, who's a stalwart of chat show television. People respected him, people believed him.
Yeah, he wouldn't lie.
He wouldn't lie. Yeah, yeah. Slight slip up there in the respect that they got Craig Charles, Dave Lister in there. You were for Red Dwarf, which
Just an odd. I mean, I don't know if it's. I must have forgot, but when he popped up on my most recent one, so I was like, oh yeah,
it's a bit jarring actually, isn't it?
it
Because you think
is.
he's going to start saying Smeghead and all that, and he's
Well, he's clearly there for the comedy effect.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
problem is towards the end when he starts to get a bit more concerned,
yeah, yeah.
doesn't come across
No, it
right.
doesn't. No,
I
yeah,
think that was potent. Looking at it, you just spoke about these people in playing the parts they played. Um, I think he was probably miscast.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Thinking back on it,
yeah. What's your take on the family? Because I kind of felt that they were actors.
Yeah, the mum
Mm.
is was dreadful
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah,
sense. No disrespect.
yeah, yeah,
I thought the girls can get away with it because children are naturally awkward anyway. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
Mm.
know, I mean, I'm a big kind of advocate for Daniel Radcliffe was awful as Harry Potter. And so, it's kind of, you watch some of those early Harry Potter films and you just think that's really bad acting.
It is bad. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so, but they kind of get away with it in that sense because you just, or are they just nervous? Are they just awkward in front of the camera? The mum really wasn't very good. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and again, is that just because I know it's fake? I'm watching it, it stands
Mm.
out more. But again, watching it live, did it
Yeah.
stand out then?
Well, like it had that screen thing at the beginning, but it didn't advertise it as being a drama.
Yeah.
It just put the names up as these are the presenters, Sarah Green, Michael Parkinson. It's only really when you get to the end and you see the end credits that by that point, you'd already established that it wasn't real, but the
Yeah.
credits confirmed it.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
made, again, like the War of the Worlds thing, they didn't really make any effort to clearly signpost that it was. I think in some of the TV magazines like Radio Times and TV Times at the time, they did say that it was a drama. Um,
Okay.
but there wasn't really much of a fanfare made about it like that. It was kept very kind of vague. Yeah.
Yeah. What they wanted, I assume.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
mean,
so.
was it? Did the mom come across as a bad actress at the
I
time?
thought so at the time.
It,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
kind
I
of took
thought
you
so at the
out of
time. Yeah,
the
yeah,
experience. That's
yeah.
what I found when I was rewatching it. I was like, it kind of jars you a little bit out of
Yeah.
the
I think
experience.
more than anything else, the thing that really sells it is the house because it was real. It was a real house.
On a real
It was
street.
on a real
Yeah,
street,
yeah, yeah,
and in hindsight, looking back at it now, we think like you mentioned off camera before we was talking about it, the Enfield poltergeist.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
got things like East Drive as well, 30 East Drive
30
as well,
Drive,
and
yeah, yeah,
there's a lot of those stories. Everybody has them across the country. There's all kinds of stories about that. I remember being told a story when I was a kid at school about somebody who lived a few blocks away from me who had a poltergeist in their bedroom. I, was this just made up or was it
yeah,
real?
yeah,
You don't know, do you?
yeah.
It's
Yeah, so it was quite close to home, I imagine, back in the day.
mm,
I was thinking the correlation between that and that first documentary I did on that
mm.
house because it pretty much that when I was rewatching Ghostwatch, that house there was
It's the same sort of principle, isn't it?
some of
Yeah,
the evidence we caught in that
yeah,
house, and people will watch my documentary and say what a load of rubbish, but
mm,
I actually experienced it.
yeah, yeah. Which
Yeah.
goes back to that idea of experiencing it for yourself. I mean, it's
And I don't care. I don't care if people watch it and think
exactly.
it's a load of rubbish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The family are okay, and I had my experiences,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, that I just don't care really what they
yeah.
think.
I think it's great that people do watch it, and I think if people know the type of person you are, that you've got scruples, and that you have got a morality, and that you do care about these people and what
Yeah.
they're experiencing, and all that kind of thing, that they know you're a genuine guy, then they will accept that, that it is what it is,
Well, I mean, some of the people that went round to the house prior to me, we tried to get them an exorcist at the time,
Right.
and the vicar kind of went round the house and basically said, I'll do it, but you need to come to church for 6 weeks and
Right.
donate." And I was like, "Well, that's just religious blackmail."
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
So
Yeah, yeah.
you can see the state that this family are in, but
Hmm.
forget that. Like, money comes first.
Yeah,
And, people were going around charging like £300-400, waving their magic bundle of sage around, throwing holy water up the wall, and claiming
yeah,
they'd fixed it. And
yeah.
within a day, it
All
was
they've done is just ruin the decor of the house,
and they'd ruined the paint on the
Yeah,
walls.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And within a day, it was back again.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there are these charlatans out there, 100.
Mm, mm,
And the first thing I said when I went through the door was, "I can't get rid of this thing for you. I won't profess to know how to do that.
hmm.
Help you understand what it is, maybe,
Yeah, yeah,
and um, get you to live with it a little bit better. But
yeah,
I can't. I'm not an exorcist."
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
they
it.
were okay with that.
Mm, that's good. I think a similar kind of thing is the channelers, the psychic.
Yeah,
People claim they're psychics as well, and like are mediums and that sort of thing. I
yeah,
do, but genuinely believe that there are some people who've got a gift, absolutely.
yeah.
But I think the vast majority of them are just con artists. They're good at reading body language. They're like the
Yeah,
old hucksters from like the P.T. Barnum type days. They're showmen. They're good at reading people's body language, and they lead you into saying certain things, and then they feed off that and take it further.
that's exactly what it is. And I've been to many of those nights. In fact, I've just arranged one up at my local pub
Right?
for next month. And a lot of them, you know, they ask leading questions,
Yeah, yeah,
and they ask very open-ended questions, and
yeah,
they'll talk to a 70-year-old and say, I think your mom's passed as well. Obviously, she's 70 years old, you know.
yeah.
Of course
She'd
her
be good
mom
for
died.
100 though, wouldn't she?
You know. So but
Yeah.
saying that, I've had experiences and meetings with people who have blown me away,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know.
it does happen. Yeah.
Absolutely, but it's I'd say they're more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing as well of experiencing things for yourself, that's something that I'm sure you do as well. But I actively encourage that with people. I kind of get why people want to try and make some money out of it. I'm not, completely going along with it, but in this day and age, it's a struggle. People do find it hard to make ends meet. But I think if you're honest and just upfront and say, look, this isn't an attempt to, convince to prove that this whatever happens after life, all that
Yeah,
kind of thing. We're not selling you anything here, but we are going to monetize. We're going to have a Patreon, maybe, on
yeah,
YouTube and all that, and put extra content on there. I think that's fine as long as you're being upfront about the way you're doing it, just not making promises to people
yeah,
or leading people down a garden path or that kind of thing. And if people know what, like going to the psychics, if you know you're just going to have a fun night out, you can have a bit of a laugh, have a drink, and don't take it too seriously. That's fine. But I think if you're going into these things with an expectation of learning, getting answers and all that kind of thing,
yeah.
it's something that you can only really do for yourself.
Well, and this is what I say to people, because so what? Then you don't watch most haunted or anything? To be honest, no, I don't watch them. No,
Not
but
anymore. No, no.
all I say to people is, look, if you're going to watch it, like that's absolutely fine.
Mm,
Just take it for what it is.
yeah, yeah,
It is an
yeah.
entertainment program. Like I say, you don't watch wrestling,
Knowing that they're actually
thinking it's
beating
a
the
real fight.
seven bells out of
Exactly.
each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you can watch it for what it is and still
Mm,
enjoy it,
yeah.
then that's absolutely fine. You know?
Yeah, I don't begrudge anybody watching it. My mom still watches Most Haunted.
Yeah,
She's great. She loves it. She watches the videos put up on YouTube as well,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it makes her happy.
And that's fine.
You
But it's
know,
just take it with a pinch of salt and
mm,
take it for what it is, really.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's that kind of the thing of I do wonder about whether maybe I'll put my conspiracy hat on for this one for a moment, but um, I've always wondered about how it is. Like take for example, recently I did a video with Andrew Johnson about the
Mm.
Stanley Kubrick and the
Yeah,
moon landing
yeah,
and all that kind of
yeah.
thing. And almost immediately after it went up on my channel and it went up on Andrew's channel, we get slapped with an official link to Wikipedia. The
Right.
Apollo, the
Yeah,
official narrative.
yeah.
I did a video about a year ago, a short video where I was talking with Mark Conlon about paranormal phenomenon, ghosts, UFOs, things like that. We happen to mention interdimensional stuff in it. It gets slapped with a link to the interdimensional extraterrestrial hypothesis on YouTube, on Wikipedia.
But that an automatic thing that comes up underneath the video.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah. Just for that one little bit we mentioned on that, me and Mark Conlon. Yeah, it's crazy.
wow.
And it was like literally like a minute or two of the whole 15-minute little video
That's
that we did on it.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. If I start up a YouTube channel, claiming to be a ghost investigator, and there's going to be no thing on there disclaimer saying, this is what people believe and what people. It's all just hypothetical. There's no evidence. Go and read Wikipedia.
Yeah, yeah.
None of that. None
No,
of that.
it's
Why is that? It's that thing of it. People, I do believe that as you and I have tried to look into these subjects to try and sort of branch out and see a larger perspective on what this phenomenon might be, especially talking about like the frequencies and energy,
Yeah,
consciousness, all that kind of thing. Um, I've always been of a mind that if you're if you're an elite type or an elite group
yeah.
and you're hell bent on controlling the masses of the world, if they start to realize that there's a lot more to what this reality is, and a lot of things don't matter, and people suddenly just stop paying the taxes and they stop going to work, that kind of thing. So they're hardly going to admit to the bigger things. So is it just it's a lot easier to just say, oh, it's ghosts, and there's not
Um,
much more to it than that. And then it's kind of like a what Andrew Johnson would call a limited hangout. Then, in a way, there's something that's been perpetuated for a long, long, long time. If that's the case.
I know you spoke in the notes when you first spoke to me about having this chat.
Hmm.
Um, Kind of alluded to like gatekeepers almost within these industries, and it's the same in the paranormal world. It's the
Oh yeah,
same
yeah.
in the UFO
Oh
world.
world, yeah.
I mean, in the UFO world, you have people that will argue over whether it's a nuts and bolts craft or whether it's interdimensional. They don't call it interdimensional now; they call it ultra terrestrial, which is the
Ultra
same.
terrestrials.
The
Although that's
same
been
thing.
around for a long time, though, hasn't it? John Keel used to talk about ultra
He
terrestrials, didn't he?
did,
And
but essentially it's
yeah,
interdimensional.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And so you have these people that argue about it, and it's this kind of division, which is of course what the elites do across society all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it happens in the paranormal, like we spoke about there. You have the people that believe it's just dead people. You have people that
Hmm.
believe it's consciousness. And if we just all took a step back and thought, well, hang on a minute, we're all after the same thing
Hmm.
here. We're all trying to find the same answers.
Mm.
If we could just put, maybe we've all got different pieces of the puzzle,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
right, and I'm right, and you're and if we
yeah.
could just take a step back and look at all these different pieces, we
Hmm.
might see that actually we have the full picture,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we're too busy fighting with each other to actually to do that. And again, that's not just with the paranormal or anything like that.
No,
That's
no.
the same in the world in general. If we
Yeah.
all stopped arguing with another bloke because he's a different colour or he supports a
Hmm.
different football team or whatever,
Absolutely.
we might actually realise
Yeah,
who the real people are that we should be rallying against.
yeah.
So I think these people do exist. I've spoken to Andrew Johnson at length and
Hmm.
Mark about these gatekeepers.
Yeah, yeah.
There are several of them that we're aware of that are
Hmm.
still existing within these
Oh, they're
kind
still at it.
of
They're still
territories,
at
and
it.
you'll
Yeah,
see them regularly on
yeah.
podcasts and talk shows and whatnot. And they're there just to kind of push you down a certain
Hmm.
road. You get too close to the truth. No, come and come
Yeah.
and go down that way now. And have you heard my latest theory? And takes you miles away from where you need to be going.
Yeah, yeah.
I genuinely believe that. Um, was that, and I don't know if you want to get into it, but is that the purpose of why programs like Most Haunted and stuff were made? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting idea. I mean, purely for people who are thinking that we're, going off the reservation now. But this is just purely a hypothesis, just
Yeah,
theorizing. It is interesting that there certainly does seem to be some indications that Ghostwatch was helped along, and the intent was there to try something out, an experiment.
yeah,
I would not label it with the same level of deep agenda as there was with War of the Worlds. That I've
yeah,
written a
yeah,
like
yeah,
250, 300-page book on that one, and then
yeah,
that really has got an agenda behind it. I don't think it's like that, but I would not put it past them to have some social psychologists there nudging things in certain directions, watching how the public reacted, all that kind of thing. And they're probably, I mean, we know for a fact that they do it with the news. They
yeah,
have social psychologists advising on how they present the news all the time.
yeah,
Same with the soap operas. They insert current day social paradigms, politics, and things like that. Climate change, identity politics, you name it. It's all in there in soap operas
yeah,
every night of the week.
yeah.
They have social psychologists who are advising them on it,
Yeah, well, I mean,
on the
yeah,
scripts.
I remember watching
So
Coronation Street during
I don't watch them, but I know it
COVID.
happens.
Well, we did. We used to watch it quite a lot, but it was during COVID, and they started to wear masks and stuff.
Mm,
But I watch TV to kind of escape this kind of stuff. And
exactly.
whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant. It's like I watch this as an escape.
Yeah.
I don't want to be reminded about
Yeah,
what's going on out in
exactly.
the real world.
You don't
Um,
want to be reminded of the dystopia that's
exactly,
arising.
and we stopped watching it, and
Yeah,
we've never watched it since.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The thing is with Coronation Street, as soon as you miss a week's worth of episodes, you'll never ever catch up ever again.
Well, I'd imagine so. I, I know people who watch it, but thankfully not too many
Well, we did
people.
it. It was a guilty pleasure of ours. You know,
Right.
this was again before our son was born, so it was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You'd have a hangover on a Sunday watching the omnibus or something on ITV.
Again, it's like we said before about not judging people. I won't judge you for having
Thank you.
watched
I
it.
appreciate that.
I personally wouldn't watch it myself. But yeah, it's so yeah, going back to what we was originally saying, I do wonder. We know there's nudge units that infiltrated the media on so many levels in so many different ways. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that let's try something, let's experiment with fear because it's so easily transferable. It's a multi-purpose currency. It can transfer it into all kinds of things. Politics and
You can, and interestingly, I always, when something comes in waves, I always kind of sit up and take notice.
mm,
So, for example, it, you can look at this one of two ways. You can look at it the non-conspiracy way of, well, why are there so many programs like that? Because they're not that popular now, believe it or not. A lot of them are reruns, they're repeats.
hmm
But from about 2000 to about 2015, they were everywhere. Like
Oh yeah, yeah,
these programs were everywhere. So, like I say, you can look at it one of two ways. Either the non-conspiracy reason is they're that popular, they just keep making more of them,
yeah. And money being the primary
and they
motivator
make the
for that.
money.
Yeah.
The conspiracy uh, possibility is that it's pushing a certain agenda.
hmm
So, I mean, how many, remember a few years back, we were just inundated with like Armageddon apocalyptic type films.
hmm
Then we're inundated with zombie apocalypse type films,
hmm
and they all come in waves.
Yeah.
And you could argue that it's because it's pushing a certain agenda, and therefore it's not that they're the only films being made. Of course, they're not.
No.
They're the only films being given funding.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
film writers will have hundreds and hundreds of scripts given to them every
Yeah.
week, and they'll
Yeah.
go, no, 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 oh, yes, no, no,
Yeah.
no, yes.
Yeah.
And so they're only looking for the ones that are pushing a particular agenda.
Yeah.
Or it's the non-conspiracy reason, and
Mm.
it's because they're popular, so let's just keep making
Yeah.
more of them.
I don't think it's that they actually commission people, although it does happen. I don't think it's that they actually commission people to write a specific
No,
thing
no.
for a specific agenda. It just happens to fit the what might possibly be a
Yeah,
larger agenda
and 10 years
at
before
the
it wouldn't have
time.
got selected, and 10 years
Yeah.
after it wouldn't have
Yeah.
got selected,
Yeah.
but because it's at that
Yeah.
time, they
Yeah.
go, oh yeah, we'll fund that one. I mean, how many films have been on the shelf for 10 years before they finally
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
green
Yeah.
light? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just whenever it fits the agenda.
Mm.
I do believe there's something in that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
is that what we were seeing when we had this massive wave of most
Mm.
haunted type programs? But what was the agenda?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly another thing as well is that it's cheap television. It's
It
certainly
is cheap,
cheaper
yeah,
than
yeah.
making a costume drama or a
Period
soap
drama,
or,
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the cheapest television. Reality television is probably a lot cheaper, but, because obviously there's a lot of gear involved in doing these things. If you're going to do it for real,
yeah,
legitimately, there's a lot of equipment involved. That yourself obviously doing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And that's people just trying to do it on a shoestring who don't have a TV channel behind them or whatever, to fund it.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. So I think in that respect, I never rule out the money aspect of it. I never ever
Of
rule that
course,
out because
of course.
it's a prime motivator for so many people. But it also can be a very convenient cover sometimes for more surreptitious things that are going on.
Yeah,
Just hide behind the money agenda.
yeah,
But
yeah,
there is other things going on.
yeah,
Social driver. I mean, I call it the noise as well. That's one of my favorite phrases for so much. People say, oh, distraction. I used to call it big distraction. I just call it the noise, almost like white noise now.
yeah,
It's just there, and you've got to just get used to tuning it out completely because you can't get rid of it. It will always be there for as long as it's needed.
yeah.
And I think a lot of what's going on at the moment with the the drone, the UAP thing. I think it's a very similar thing with that as well.
But
It
again, it
ha
comes in waves, doesn't it? You see,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's a reason. What are they trying to what are they
And
trying to get across?
if you want to be a coincidence theorist, let's call that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
coincidence theorist. You got War of the Worlds, which is broadcast on um, Halloween. You've got Ghostwatch, which is broadcast on Halloween. The key news, I mean, all these drone, UFO, whatever you want to, UAP, whatever you want to call them. Yes, they were seemingly cropping up everywhere, but the one that I continually kept seeing all the time was New Jersey.
yes.
And it started at Halloween. It
Halloween.
started
Yeah,
at the end of October. And I had a conversation with Andrew Johnson about it fairly recently because I was talking to a friend of mine and I think I can't make the connection here. What's the connection? Where have I heard that before? And this friend said to me, "You stupid sod, you wrote a book about it. War of the Worlds, 1938, New Jersey, Halloween."
yeah.
And you got Halloween, UFEs, aliens potentially as the narrative. Um, New Jersey, you
On
know.
Halloween.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that could just be one massive coincidence,
Nah,
but
I don't think it is personally. I don't think it is.
I think it's all part of that study of fear,
Yes,
study of
absolutely.
psychology, that
Yeah,
human psychology, what makes us tick, which goes back to that, what are our motivations for things? Why do we react certain ways? Going back to that documentary that you've been working on, which
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing that because I'm a bit of an amateur psychology sleuth,
Well,
I'm fascinated by the way the mind works and what makes
it's
people tick, and
the one thing that I've taken away from it is I'm really surprised by how few of the people I spoke to, and I must have interviewed. I mean, they're not all going to make it to the film, but dozens of people, and I'm surprised by how few of them actually think about what they're doing.
hmm,
So one of my regular questions to them would be, so what do you think your experience here? What when you come out to investigate the paranormal, what are
yeah,
you investigating? Do you think it's
yeah,
dead people? Do you think it's this? Do you think it's that?
yeah,
And the amount of people that just sit there and go, don't know,
don't know.
haven't really
Mm,
thought about it. And
mm.
that blows my mind. Like to be going out and doing that every weekend as they do and not really be giving thought as to what they're doing.
I wonder sometimes if it's just as simple as for some people, not for everybody, and also the phenomenon is much, much larger than that
Yeah,
because there's clearly a definite phenomenon. Like I say,
yeah,
I could sit here for an hour and tell you stories about things that have happened in my life. It doesn't matter if no one else believes me. Some of them I've witnessed with other people, and they, to this day, our stories corroborate. One of them 20 years ago, one of my closest friends, we experienced a bizarre experience. I'd have to be very careful how very sparing on the details, but we literally watched a man, his face transform, his eyes go dark, almost black,
yeah.
laughed like he was possessed by the devil, and
Wow.
his face changed shape. It became elongated. Myself,
Transfiguration.
closest friend, and a mutual acquaintance of ours as well. I can't get into any more detail than that because discretion and whatnot for the circumstances. But
Yeah.
um, it was like your classic possession from a horror film. I've never seen anything so scary in my life, and I never want to. I hope I never see anything like that ever again. I can't get into the circumstances. This person became, and just was exhausted afterwards. Their face returned to normal, and it was like they were absolutely exhausted. Drained. I've seen
Wow.
what people would term as full-bodied, not even translucent or floating across the floor, full-bodied people walking in front of me, turned around, smiled at me, walked into a room, closed the door behind them. I thought something was a bit amiss by the way they looked clothes-wise, followed them into the room. This was a place I used to work at. It's not somewhere I work now. This was 30 years ago where I worked. It was a classic ghost thing, as they would call it. Went into the room, nobody in there. There was no
Wow.
way that person could go out of the room. There was no doors. This was like a third story floor. If they'd have jumped out the window, they'd have killed themselves, broke
Yeah.
their neck on the way
Yeah.
down. I looked under the beds, I looked into the wardrobes, the person wasn't
Wow.
there. And I came down and I said to the person who ran the place at the time, I said, just started to describe it. And she went, "Stop there. We've all seen her. We've all seen her. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's nothing." And I just,
Wow.
what you're saying is nothing to worry about. Is it? Is it what people would say? Yeah, yeah. And it's enough for me. It's enough
Yeah.
for me to know that whatever it's, instead, aside from just trying to slap these definitions on it, there is definitely a phenomenon at work. I wouldn't even dare to say what I think it actually is.
Yeah,
There's definitely a measurable, quantifiable phenomenon there.
yeah, definitely.
That's it, really, for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it just amazes me how many people don't go that deep into thinking about it.
Mm.
You ask anyone, everyone has a ghost story.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter, you might get a man in a pub who doesn't want to admit it in front of all his mates.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You get him on his own
yeah,
and say,
yeah.
come on now. Come
He'll
on,
tell
Steve.
you. Yeah.
Tell me, have you ever had it? Think back. Have you ever had anything? And I guarantee he'll come out with something. Well, when I was about 7, and he'll have a story.
Mm,
Everyone has a ghost story.
mm, yeah.
Everyone does.
I mean, I'm assuming that from your investigations that you've done, you clearly have caught things from time to time. Not necessarily caught
Uh,
them, but experienced them yourself off camera.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, to give a quick story there, then. So, the house that we investigated in Essex is a prime example. We've
Hmm.
got some
Yeah, yeah,
fantastic evidence that you can see in the film. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
clothes manifesting out of the ceiling, for example. Um, but the experience I had there was the. Did I ever tell you about the shoe?
I'm not sure.
The
That just
shoe.
jogged my memory.
So we were upstairs. We were filming stuff and everything, but it we didn't get everything on film, of course. And this thing was moving around. It doesn't matter where we went, we'd hear it in the next room, then we'd hear it, and I was like, right, we've got to split up. So I ended up set in this one bedroom, and so you had the door kind of like there, and then I there was a bed. I sat on the bed, so the door's now to my right, and on the back of the door was a shoe rack where some the shoes were. So I'm sat on the bed, pitch black, and I'm in there for about a minute, and I get this thud in the middle of my back, enough to kind of make me go, "Ooh, hello."
Mm,
So I've stood up, shone my torch, and there is now a shoe on the bed.
wow.
So this shoe has left the shoe rack, come down right angle, gone behind me, done a 180, and hit me in the back. I left the room pretty sharpish, kind of gathered everyone back onto the landing, and I said, "This has just happened. Who wants to go in next?" Reluctantly, one of the lads went in. So Rich went in again. Now what he's doing is the shoe's still on the bed. He's now standing facing the door. So the shoe and the bed are to his right. He's standing facing the door. It wasn't 30 seconds before he come running out, said something's just hit me in the back. So we've gone back into the bedroom and the shoe is no longer on the bed. It's now on the bedroom floor.
Right.
And that all happened in the space of about 2 minutes.
Wow.
So we never get that on film. And I've told this
Yeah.
story, and again, it was great because Rich experienced it and we can corroborate it. But other people have said, what a load of crap. But I don't care.
Yeah. That's
It
it.
was
That's
a
it.
great experience. And
Yeah.
just kind of to finish on with the experiences, in the new documentary coming out soon, we were at a place called the Judge's Lodgings in Prestine in Wales. It had been a relatively quiet night. Some people felt like they'd experienced stuff, but it was difficult for us because we wanted to be investigating, but we couldn't. We
Hmm.
were busy interviewing people and carrying our camera equipment around and lugging boom arms everywhere and stuff. So we didn't really get to do anything. So on the way down to start packing up about midnight, we said, "Look, there's a Ouija board in that room. Shall we?" There was three of us. Like, should we just go and have a bit of fun? We've worked all night. So that the group are they're away down in the basement. We can hear them. We know they're there. So we walked into this room. It's a big grand house. This so we're in this massive grand living room. So we're sat at this table doing a Ouija board, and we've got this on film. It'll be in the documentary. So we're asking questions. Is anyone here? Blah blah blah. And we can hear these little things around the room, little knocks, little creaks, and we're like, you can hear us. Like, you hear that? Oh, what was that? Can you hear that? And then literally out of nowhere, 5 knocks, and I can you hear that? Can you hear me knocking there?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was literally like, and I mean it. They were five distinct on the door,
Right. Okay.
and it was enough to make me turn to the door and say hello, thinking someone from the
Someone's going
group
to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
wanting to come in. No one there.
Wow.
And outside was were your classic. This is like a 200-300-year-old building. Your classic wooden floorboards. You would hear people approaching. You would hear them run off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had this sting. Now, when we've boosted up the sound to get to try and make the knocks more distinct on the camera,
Right.
uh, we've also picked up voices
Oh, right. Okay.
going on all at the same time.
Right.
But nothing happened to us all night. We were moaning because the group were using certain bits of equipment that I don't
Hmm.
really agree with, using apps on your phone and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we
Mm,
basically went into this room, stripped it right back to basics for about 2 minutes, and we captured something.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, people will watch it and say someone's knocking the table behind the camera or whatever, but whatever. It was, in my mind, one of the best experiences I've ever had.
That's it, isn't it? It's when you experience it for yourself, it doesn't really matter that much if
No,
yeah, it's great if you could hold up something.
yes.
But of course, we live in that age now where it's so easy to debunk these things by saying,
They would just tell you that it's fake, it's
yeah,
Photoshop, it's
yeah,
CGI,
yeah. It's
and then
enough
you,
that you experience it yourself. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and like like you said, you had two people with your experience.
Hmm.
I had the sound man and the cameraman there with me as well, and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
all
yeah,
experienced it at the same time.
yeah, yeah,
And that's fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm aware of the time. Obviously, I don't want to hold you up any longer because I know if unless there's anything else you wanted to
No, it's
chat
really that.
about.
No, it's down to you. Like I say, we could always do a part two if you felt the people wanted a part two, we can give it them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as well to people that please go back in time a year and check out Kieran's previous video that we did together, the Twin Peaks, esoteric Twin Peaks. It's actually done all right. I mean, it's got about 600 views on there, so
Oh, okay.
it hasn't done too badly. It's still woefully underwatched, I think, given, but I'm biased with Twin Peaks, you know. It's that thing. Well, it actually jives with what we were talking about. It doesn't really matter who sees it and what, you know. It's that thing. I sometimes, I just make the videos I want because that's the type of program that I would want to watch.
That's exactly right, Carl. I
So
mean,
I get
back
my
when I did
mates on
the
and talk about stuff that I want to
exactly,
talk. You know.
when I did my podcast, it wasn't
Yeah,
about
yeah,
making money, it wasn't
yeah,
about getting famous.
yeah.
It was a platform
No.
where I could talk to some
Hmm.
really interesting people.
That's it,
And if
exactly.
somebody else wants to listen to it, then
Yeah, yeah.
fine.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean that it's a bonus if people watch it.
Yeah,
You know, people,
exactly.
I don't know, I always love it. You know, and people get back to me and say, within reason. I mean, and you obviously get trolls in the comments
Yeah,
sometimes. And
of
that,
course.
and
Yeah,
some people constructive criticism, which is I'm fine with that. You know,
yeah.
people ask
I, I
questions, and
um I remember I did an interview with Andrew Johnson. I know because you brought him up, and this was during the whole lockdown thing. And I was running at the time. I was doing the Collective Conspiracy Show.
oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Not many of them have survived YouTube.
right,
I mean, I
yeah,
did one with Mark Conlon about 9/11. That got took
yes,
down
yeah,
because we incited violence, apparently. But the one I was talking with Andrew, and it was red hot, and it was like, remember during COVID, it was like heat waves, and so I'm doing this interview with Andrew, and I've got a vest on.
right,
But so in the video, I'm just wearing a vest,
right,
and I say at the start, like, sorry for wearing a vest, like, but I'm bloody hot, and and there were people commenting that basically calling me a shill, telling me that I'm an insider. Look at him, he can't even wear a shirt and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, like, really? Okay.
yeah. You don't half get them, don't you?
But yeah, it's
You
like
really do. I mean, you
just
bless them.
just
I
don't
mean,
bother reading it.
yeah. Well, my attitude is because it takes a lot to rattle me. It really does. People say I'm that laid back. I'm practically horizontal most of the time, but wishful thinking on my part, I suppose. But I mean, bless them. They've got to have a hobby, haven't they? And if a hobby is
Yeah.
just annoying people at least they're leaving other people alone while they're pestering me about.
Yeah. So if anyone plans on commenting on this video, carry
Yeah.
on.
Within reason, of course. I'll just block you if you say anything too bad. I ain't got time for
No,
that.
no.
No, I mean, it's again, it goes back to that things, doesn't it? You read through the comments of these paranormal videos sometimes, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It really is crazy.
Yep.
If you're
Yep.
somebody who's like we mentioned about Beardo gets scared, I mean, he's probably, I don't know, but I generally like what he has to say,
Mm,
he's a bit
yeah.
extreme the way he approaches it sometimes, but he's very much a person who's open still, despite the
Yeah.
fact that he debunks a lot of people, he still believes that there's something that's going on and he'd like to experience it himself, and I
He's
think he
still
has experienced things.
he has, and he's
So,
still doing it, isn't he? It's
yeah.
not like he's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe that's his stick. He's fell into his little groove now of being that person that debunks people, and that's what people expect. But, never be a slave to the algorithm on YouTube. That's the worst thing you can do. Just make what you enjoy, make what you're interested
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
You know,
Don't do what you
talk
think
to
the
people you
people
want,
want.
whatever your stick is in life. You know, just enjoy it, just
Yeah,
experience it.
that's it. Yeah,
I actually do. I'll leave this deep philosophical thought for people. Is I genuinely believe that's what this existence, whatever it is, all about. We're here to experience something, whatever it may be, for better or worse. It's a journey. It's a, you know, make the most of it while you can. You know,
yeah.
because who knows what's around the corner.
That's it. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah. And on that note, I'll say thank you so much, Kieran, for joining me.
Thank you,
Bit
Carl.
of a different one, this one. We've kind of been all over the place with it, but
Yeah, yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got something. Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
yeah. It's like I say, I'm happy to come back whenever you want.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, more than welcome. Yeah, we can sort something out definitely. Um, I'll put all the links in the description for this video if you want to check out any of Kieran's work, his other places that he's got stuff on the internet and his books and things like that. And as soon as the documentary becomes available, I will edit it into the description of this video as well so that people can watch that. All right then, mate. So I will say
Lovely.
thank you
Thank
again,
you.
and I
Yep.
will
Thank you very
see you
much.
again very, very soon. All the
Yep.
best for
Cheers,
now.
Carl. Thank you. Bye.